In 427 BC, with the Peloponnesian War raging, Thucydides the historian tells us that Cleon was the most violent man at Athens, and at that time by far the most powerful with the people. And Plutarch says his manner of public speaking was to lift up his dress and smack his bare thigh and run around yelling. So he made an excellent caricature for comedy, and the greatest of the comic playwrights in classical Athens was Aristophanes, who used a variety of unkind terms for Cleon. He says he smells like a seal, does not wash his privates, and has a rectum like a camel. And in Wasps, Cleon is indirectly targeted as Aristophanes takes on the Athenian juries. The jurymen, 6,000 of them on the public dole ever since Pericles. But Aristophanes blamed Cleon for particularly instigating and corrupting the jurors, using them to convict his political enemies, typically on charges of embezzling tribute payments from the empire, relying on the prejudice of these jurors, who belonged to the older generation by whom the empire had been originally secured. In Wasps, we meet them in a horde, but Aristophanes has no problem mocking the dignity of the veteran jurors. In this play, they are the sport of the comic. The most zealous of them is called Love Cleon, the thigh slapper's most abated fawn. His peers are a chorus of old men, panting with deceived gratitude for the meager pay ladled out by Cleon. They condemn whomever he accuses. They cheapen the name of tyranny by making it a marketplace buzzword. They are costumed with stingers. They are easily disturbed into a frenzy. They are drones in the nest of state. They rile and swarm, surround and sting. This inquisitor chorus, these are the Wasps. When this play opens, the audience sees a house covered with a giant net, two slaves keeping watch, and a man sleeping on the roof. This is the main character, Loathe Cleon, and he has put his father under house arrest because his father is too addicted to serving on juries. So this is kind of an intervention, and it is no easy task to keep him inside this house. Love Cleon loves judging so much that he makes some silly attempts at escape, such as strapping himself underneath a donkey, pretending to be smoke coming out of the chimney. So Aristophanes can be a little silly. When this happens, Love Cleon pops his head out the chimney. I'm smoke coming out. Smoke? All right, then smoke from what kind of wood? Impeach wood, is what Love Cleon says. Now, the Greek word being translated by Jeffrey Henderson is sikinos, and the footnote says that that's fig wood, which is a word play off of sikifantes, which means malicious prosecutors, and so we can spot the Greek origins of a certain English word. So after these charades, the chorus of wasp jurors enters. They've come to collect their companion Love Cleon for that morning's jury roll. And their entrance, I think, is meant to be funny because of their age. I think the actors come in exaggerating the lethargy of age. The Persian Wars were 58 years prior to this play, and these men fought in them. And Aristophanes is not above some jokes about the elderly. We're going to skip those because they're a little cheap. But there are some lines from the chorus leader that do amuse me, and he loses his temper with the boy holding the lamp. They need this lamp to see because they're up so damn early in the morning before the break of dawn. And before we read these lines that he says, I was thinking about something that Friedrich Hölderlin says in his commentary about Sophocles. He points to the way symmetrical poetic lines accentuate the conflict of Antigone. And one of the examples that Hölderlin uses is when Creon says, "Why did you break the law like that?" Antigone responds, "My Zeus did not dictate that law." The conflict of the play is encapsulated and heightened by the custom that all Greek theater was to obey certain metrical rules even during those dialogues that consisted of a contentious exchange of one-liners. But Aristophanes is a comic, and so he also has to obey certain rules, but he can use them to a different effect. His conflicts aren't so serious. And so take these lines from the chorus leader. He says angrily to the boy, "I warn you, I dish out punishment to people bigger than you." And the next line, "Hold on, this looks like mud I'm stepping in." So Aristophanes, I think, is spoofing the clashes of tragedy and frustrating the conflict by robbing the over-serious litigants of dignity. When I think of that 1957 production of Oedipus Rex with Douglas Campbell, if that's anything like they did it in ancient Greece, how could you not want to spoof that as a comic when you listen to some of those slightly overacted lines in that performance? Like, there's one line that always makes me laugh a little bit when Oedipus says something like, "One thing might be the key to many things." And he says lines like that's how he talks in that performance. And I wonder if Aristophanes used an actor who could overdo it like that for this chorus leader. "I've punished people bigger than you. Oh no, I've stepped in shit." You can make a lot of humor that way. I wonder if that's what Aristophanes did. So we've got our wasps on the stage. And when they learn that one of their own is being kept under guard, and after Love Cleon lets them know that he's being detained inside, they lament it in these lines. The chorus says, "Isn't this terrible? Isn't this barefaced tyranny? Oh, my country. Oh, my godforsaken Theorus. Oh, any other bootlicker who stands up for us." If we look at the Greek for those lines about godforsaken Theorus, we can get an idea about the humor of Aristophanes. O polis kai Theoru Theochthria. There's alliteration in those lines. It's as though the chorus is trying to poeticize their laments, like a poetic invocation. But it's an invocation without a poem, because their momentum dies in the subsequent phrase. Oh, Theoru, Theochthria, or any other bootlicker. Right? Aristophanes is mocking them for being unable to elaborate on these big-sounding phrases. Oh, bare-faced tyranny, and so forth. So as we said in the opening, Aristophanes considers that words meaning tyranny had been cheapened through overdramatic use. Loath Cleon says, "How you see tyranny and conspirators everywhere as soon as anyone voices a criticism large or small. I hadn't even heard of the word being used for at least 50 years, but nowadays it's cheaper than sardines." And so just as there is nothing real behind these words, neither is there anything behind their ostentatious stingers. The chorus is running around with stingers attached to their rumps. For in the next instant, they try to attack as in a swarm, as the chorus leader orders them. "Every man wheel this way, draw stingers and charge him, with ranks closed, in good order, full of rage and spirit, so he'll never forget what a swarm he's angered." The word for swarm, sminos. Something about Aristophanes makes me want to look up the Greek. And indeed, the slave Xanthias is terrified. He says, "I'm scared just looking at their stingers." But Loath Cleon bids him be brave. He says, "I recognize the rustle of fig leaves when I hear it," as in empty bluster. The mob is all talk. They are dispersed with smoke, the smoke pot of Loath Cleon, which is to say that just as they are roused by phantom tyranny and full of hot air, so are they best repelled using devices that most resemble their own, fight smoke with smoke. So there's a bit of a stalemate, and what winds up happening is there's an oral debate between father and son, with Love Cleon arguing why the jury is the greatest thing, and then the son, Loath Cleon, pointing out to him how it's not. And in this part of the play, Aristophanes is a little less comical and a little more serious, to the point really where there's nothing to interpret. He's perfectly clear. Loath Cleon says, "Listen, Pop, calculate roughly how much tribute we receive altogether from the allied cities. Our total income from all this is nearly 2,000 talents. Now set aside the annual payment to the jurors, all 6,000 of them. we get, I reckon, a sum of 150 talents. At this, Love Cleon exclaims, so the pay we've been getting doesn't even amount to a tenth of the revenue? Where is the rest of the money routed? And Loath Cleon says, to the I won't betray the Athenian rabble and I'll fight for the masses bunch. You choose them to rule you, father, because you've been buttered up by these slogans. So we can save some of these political points for another video if we want. The ultimate message in this play is not to fix the political system, it's to just ignore it and live well. That's what Loath Cleon says. I want my father to quit his dawn wandering and live a genteel life. And the Greek words for genteel life are vion genaion. And to this end, Loath Cleon convinces his father to give up jury service and to judge in his own home. They set up this mini court where Love Cleon can judge the servants and slaves in the household. And it's a bit of a farce. We're skipping this part too, because once all that is over, Loath Cleon proposes that they engage in a bit of a booze up. And Love Cleon is a little reluctant. He says, oh no, drinking's bad. Wine gets you doors broken in, assault and battery, then paying money for the damage while you're hungover. Now, obviously, Love Cleon is absolutely correct. But Loath Cleon says this, no, not if you're in the company of fine gentlemen. They'll beg the victim off. Or else you yourself can tell him some witty story, something funny by Aesop, and then you've turned the whole thing into a joke. So he lets you off and goes on his merry way. Now, I've never heard of this strategy working. Bad advice, I think. But let's see where Aristophanes is going with this. The play does end in a drunken rampage by Love Cleon that gets him sued by a number of people. But we get some further comedy, I think, at the expense of the Wasp personality, which is that they have no wit, because he tries to do what his son says. He tries to charm his way out of these potential lawsuits, and this is what happens. A woman, Myrtia, comes in to accuse him of knocking over her tray of bread, and Love Cleon tries to joke his way out of it. He says, listen, madam, I'd like to tell you a charming story. When Aesop was walking home from dinner one evening, a bold and tipsy bitch started barking at him, and he said, bitch, if you'd trade that nasty tongue of yours for some flour, I think you'd be showing sense. Of course, this does not work. And so he adds, just listen and see if you think I'm making sense. Once Lasus and Simonides were training rival choruses, and Lasus said, I couldn't care less. That's the punchline. I couldn't care less. Not a lot of great timing with all this. To me, the point of the Wasps, though, is bound up a little bit in this exchange. The first thing to take from this, I think, is that the Wasp is inherently charmless. If you think about people who you know who are the most zealous political partisans, and by these I do not mean people who simply have an opinion, I mean the people who cannot have one without becoming perpetually resentful. These people are rarely, if ever, charming. And Love Cleon can't just transform himself into a sweet talker. Once a partisan wasp, always a partisan wasp. His condition can be treated, but it cannot be cured. But that's just one interpretation. You could also look at this and think that actually, in Aristophanes' opinion, his little story was witty. And this woman also has the wasp temperament, and that's why it doesn't work on her. And the point of the story could be that if she had a better disposition, she would have sold her bread and would not have had a full tray by evening time. In either case, it is important that he says, I could care less. That is the sign that his character has been reformed. The old Love Cleon would have gotten right in her face and embraced the fact that there's this lawsuit coming his way and been an equally zealous litigant against her. But he's not anymore. Now she's coming after him, and he couldn't care less. This is the moment. This is Ebenezer Scrooge handing out presents and dancing while he's shaving. And even though his behavior is not good, this is a comedy. And as for this woman who had her tray of bread knocked over, I think we're supposed to see her as someone who has overreacted to a harm done that is not so very great. Cheer up, says Aristophanes. That's why the last scene of the play is a dance contest. Love Cleon challenges the tragic actors to a competition Confident in the triumph of comedy over tragedy, he makes this pronouncement: I challenge all comers, any tragic performer who claims to be a good dancer, come right up here and dance against me. Anyone out there care to try? And when three tragic actors do come forward, the chorus seems to want the whole audience to get up and dance as well, imploring them to discard their natural disposition to the sea crabbiness of a tragedian. You renowned children of Sir Salty, jump along the sand and the shore of the barren sea. Brethren of shrimps, whirl a swift foot all around, and someone kick out the furnicus caper, so that seeing the foot in the air, the audience will cry, ooh. Now lead us out of here dancing, if you please, and quickly, for no one has ever done this before, to take a comic chorus off and dance. These are the last lines. The point of the play is to live that vion ienion.